Stop waiting. Stop waiting to feel motivated. Stop waiting to feel confident. Stop waiting for life to slow down. Because here's a hard truth most people never accept. If you don't force yourself to improve, life will force you to stay the same. No one wakes up every day feeling ready. No one feels disciplined all the time. The people who improve aren't special, they're consistent. This story is about discipline. Not the harsh kind. Not the motivational quotes. The kind that actually works when motivation disappears. Motivation feels powerful, but it's unreliable. At first, motivation feels like everything. It feels like energy, clarity, excitement. On motivated days, you wake up with ideas in your head and belief in your chest. You feel ready. You tell yourself, this is it. I'm finally going to change. You plan. You imagine progress. You picture a better version of yourself, and for a moment, it feels real. Those days feel good. But they don't last. Because motivation is a feeling. And feelings change. Some mornings you wake up inspired. You feel light. You feel capable. You feel like effort won't be that hard today. You move faster. You talk differently. You believe in yourself a little more. On those days, improvement feels natural. Then there are other mornings. You wake up tired. Heavy. Uninterested. The excitement is gone. The ideas feel distant. The goals you were so excited about yesterday now feel unnecessary, maybe even pointless. You tell yourself you'll start later. You tell yourself you need rest. You tell yourself today isn't the right day. And that's where the problem begins. If improvement depends on how you feel, you will stop the moment it gets uncomfortable. Not because you're weak. Not because you're lazy. But because feelings were never meant to carry long-term responsibility. Motivation doesn't show up on command. It doesn't care about your goals. It doesn't care about consistency. It comes when it wants, stays for a while, and leaves without warning. That's why so many people start strong. They start when motivation is high. They commit when emotions are excited. They promise change when belief is loud. They buy the book. They join the gym. They plan the routine. They tell people about it. And for a few days, maybe even a few weeks, it works. Then discomfort arrives. The work gets boring. Progress slows down. Results don't show up fast enough. Life gets busy. Energy drops. And suddenly, motivation disappears. Not with a dramatic exit. Quietly. One skipped day becomes two. Two becomes a break. The break becomes quitting. Not loudly. Not officially. Quietly. That's why so many people don't fail in public. They quit in private. They stop talking about their goals. They stop showing up. They stop believing it's possible for them. And later, when they look back, they don't say, I quit. They say, life got in the way. They say, I lost motivation. They say, it just didn't work out. But the truth is simpler. Motivation left, and nothing else was there to carry them forward. That's the weakness of motivation. It's emotional. And emotions are unstable. Motivation feels powerful at the start because it removes resistance. Everything feels lighter when you're motivated. You don't argue with yourself. You don't negotiate. You don't procrastinate. You just move. But motivation has a condition. It works only when things feel good. The moment improvement starts demanding effort, patience, or discomfort, motivation steps back. Discipline doesn't. Discipline doesn't ask how you feel. It doesn't ask if you're inspired. It doesn't ask if you're confident. It doesn't ask if today feels special. Discipline asks one simple question. What needs to be done? And that's why discipline wins when motivation fades. Discipline shows up on the days motivation avoids. It shows up when you're tired. When you're bored. When you're frustrated. When no one is watching. When progress feels invisible. Discipline doesn't feel exciting. It feels steady. It's not loud. It's not emotional. It's quiet and repetitive. And that's exactly why it works. Think about it. If success required motivation every single day, no one would succeed. No one feels inspired all the time. No one wakes up excited to do hard things forever. The people who improve long-term aren't more motivated than you. They're more disciplined. They don't wait for the right feeling. They move first. They understand something most people don't. Feelings follow action, not the other way around. On disciplined days, you don't feel ready before you start. You feel ready after you've started. You don't feel confident before the work. You feel confident after doing the work. Discipline creates momentum. Motivation feeds on momentum. But discipline doesn't need motivation to begin. That's the shift. When improvement depends on motivation, you give control to your emotions. And emotions are unpredictable. When improvement depends on discipline, you keep control. You decide in advance what you will do regardless of how the day feels. This doesn't mean discipline is easy. Discipline is uncomfortable. It asks you to act against your impulses. It asks you to do what's necessary instead of what feels good. But discomfort is temporary. Regret lasts longer. Most people don't struggle because they don't know what to do. They struggle because they rely on motivation to do it. And motivation disappears the moment things get hard. Discipline stays. It stays when progress is slow. It stays when results are delayed. It stays when no one is encouraging you. And slowly something changes. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop waiting for perfect days. You stop asking, do I feel like it? You start asking, is this part of who I'm becoming? That's when improvement becomes inevitable. Because once discipline takes over, quitting becomes harder than continuing. Motivation may start the journey, but discipline is what finishes it. And that's why discipline wins when motivation fades. When people hear the words, force yourself, their minds immediately go somewhere dark. They imagine punishment. They imagine pressure. They imagine yelling at themselves in the mirror, pushing through pain, ignoring everything they feel. They imagine violence toward the self. That's not what this is. That misunderstanding is why so many people reject discipline before they even try it. They think forcing themselves means being cruel, harsh, or heartless. They think it means grinding until they break. But real force isn't violent. Real force is quiet, calm, intentional. It doesn't shout. It doesn't threaten. It doesn't attack your emotions. It simply decides. Force means deciding in advance. Not deciding in the moment when emotions are loud and logic is tired. Not deciding when motivation shows up because motivation is unreliable. Not deciding when life feels easy because life rarely stays that way. Force means you decide before the moment arrives. You decide when your mind is clear. You decide when you're calm. You decide when you can see the bigger picture. And once that decision is made, you don't renegotiate it every day. Most people live in reaction mode. They wake up and ask themselves how they feel. If they feel energized, they act. If they feel tired, they delay. If they feel confident, they try. If they feel unsure, they stop. Their actions depend on emotions, and emotions change constantly. So progress becomes unstable. One good day, one bad week. One burst of effort followed by long gaps. One promise made in excitement, broken in discomfort. Not because they don't care. Because they never decided in advance. Force is deciding that no matter how you feel, you will show up. Not perfectly. Not with intensity. Just honestly. You show up even when the day feels heavy. You show up even when the excitement is gone. You show up even when no one is watching and no one is clapping. Because you already decided. The decision is no longer emotional. It's structural. Like brushing your teeth. Like showing up to work. Like stopping at a red light. You don't debate those things daily. You decided once. This kind of force is actually freeing. Because it removes inner conflict. When you rely on feelings, your mind argues with itself all day. Should I do it? Do I feel like it? Maybe later. I'll start tomorrow. That argument drains energy. Force ends the argument. It says, we already decided. And suddenly your mind gets quieter. Deciding that emotions don't control your actions doesn't mean you ignore emotions. It means you stop letting them lead. You still feel tired. You still feel unmotivated. You still feel doubtful sometimes. But feelings become information, not commands. You acknowledge them without obeying them. I feel tired and I'm still showing up. I feel unmotivated and I'm still doing the work. I feel uncomfortable and I'm still moving forward. That's not violence. That's leadership. Most people think discipline is about intensity. It's not. It's about consistency. Force isn't about pushing harder. It's about removing choice where choice causes damage. You don't force yourself to do everything. You force yourself to do the things that matter, especially when your emotions would prefer comfort. Deciding that comfort is no longer in charge is one of the hardest decisions a person can make. Because comfort feels protective. Comfort says, rest a little more. Comfort says, you've had a long day. Comfort says, you can start later. And sometimes comfort is right. Rest matters. Recovery matters. But comfort becomes dangerous when it becomes the decision maker. When comfort decides everything, growth stops. Comfort doesn't ask where you want to be next year. It only cares about right now. It only cares about avoiding discomfort in the moment. And the problem is, the future is built in uncomfortable moments. Small ones. Quiet ones. Moments where no one forces you except yourself. Force means deciding that improvement doesn't wait for feelings. You don't wait to feel ready. You don't wait to feel confident. You don't wait to feel inspired. Because if you do, you'll wait forever. You act, and feelings follow later. This is the part most people get backwards. They believe motivation creates action. In reality, action creates motivation. Think about how many times you felt unmotivated, started anyway, and then felt better after you began. The walk you didn't want to take but felt clearer afterward. The work session you resisted but felt proud once it was done. The habit you almost skipped but felt stronger for keeping. The feeling didn't come first. The action did. Force is choosing to trust the process over your mood. Your mood is temporary. Your process is permanent. When you let your mood decide, your progress becomes fragile. When you let your process decide, progress becomes inevitable. This kind of force isn't loud. No one sees it. It happens in small moments. When you get up even though the bed feels warm. When you open the notebook even though your mind resists. When you start the task even though you feel slow and unfocused. No drama. Just movement. At first, this feels uncomfortable. Because your mind is used to being consulted. It's used to negotiating. When you stop negotiating, the mind pushes back. It says, "Why are we doing this?" It says, "This doesn't feel good." It says, "This isn't necessary." That resistance is normal. It's not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's a sign you're changing the pattern. Force doesn't mean ignoring your limits. It means respecting your future more than your temporary discomfort. You still adjust. You still pace yourself. You still listen to your body. But you don't let excuses disguise themselves as self-care. You learn the difference. Over time, something surprising happens. What once felt forced starts to feel natural. The mind adapts. The habit becomes familiar. The resistance weakens. The action becomes part of your identity. And the same thing that once required force now requires very little effort. That's how discipline compounds. People often think disciplined people are born that way. They're not. They simply decided earlier. They decided when emotions were calm, not chaotic. And they kept that decision. Force is not about being hard on yourself. It's about being honest. Honest about where comfort has taken you. Honest about what waiting has cost you. Honest about the gap between who you are and who you want to be. And then deciding to close that gap, slowly, steadily, without drama. You don't force yourself because you hate yourself. You force yourself because you care about who you're becoming. Because you understand that the future version of you depends on the present version of you acting even when it's inconvenient. There will be days when force feels heavy. Days when showing up feels pointless. Days when progress feels invisible. Days when you question whether it's worth it. Those are the days that matter most. Because those are the days when force protects your momentum. Force keeps you moving when motivation disappears. And motivation always disappears. This is why force doesn't mean violence. Violence destroys. Force builds. It builds structure. It builds reliability. It builds trust between you and yourself. Every time you act despite not feeling like it, you send your mind a message. I don't abandon myself. I do what I said I would do. I can be trusted. That message changes everything. Eventually, you stop seeing force as punishment. You see it as clarity. You stop asking, "Do I feel like it?" And start asking, "What did I decide?" That single shift removes confusion. You don't wake up wondering who you'll be today. You already know. You'll be the person who shows up. Not because it feels good in the moment, but because it builds a life that feels good long-term. Force doesn't mean pushing through pain blindly. It means deciding your direction and refusing to be turned around by temporary emotions. It means comfort no longer has the final say. You act first. Feelings follow later. And slowly, the life you once forced yourself toward becomes the life you live naturally. Not because it got easier, but because you became stronger, steadier, and more committed to your own growth. That's real force. Quiet. Non-violent. Unbreakable. Discipline is not hate. It's respect. That sentence alone takes time to really sink in because for a lot of people, discipline has always felt like punishment. Like forcing yourself to do things you don't want to do. Like being hard, strict, cold, and unforgiving with yourself. Somewhere along the way, discipline became associated with suffering, with pressure, with constantly telling yourself, "You're not enough yet." So it makes sense why so many people avoid it. Why they resist routines. Why they push structure away. Why they say, "I don't want to live like that," when they imagine discipline. But the truth is quieter and very different. Discipline is not hate. It's respect. It's not about hurting yourself into becoming better. It's about caring about yourself enough to show up. Real discipline starts with a simple statement you make to yourself, sometimes without words. I care about my future enough to do what's hard today. Not what's dramatic. Not what looks impressive. not what gives instant results. What's hard? Hard might be waking up when your body wants to stay in bed. Hard might be starting work when motivation is nowhere to be found. Hard might be saying no to something comfortable because you know it will cost you later. Hard might be sticking to a small habit when no one is watching and nothing feels rewarding yet. Discipline is choosing those moments again and again, not because you hate where you are, but because you respect where you're going. Most people don't fail because they lack talent or intelligence. They fail because they don't trust themselves. And trust doesn't disappear suddenly. It erodes slowly. It erodes every time you promise yourself, "I'll start tomorrow," and don't. Every time you say, "This time I'm serious," and quit quietly. Every time you make an agreement with yourself and break it like it didn't matter. At first it feels harmless. You tell yourself, "It's just one day." Then, "I'll get back on track next week." Then, "Life is busy right now." But your mind is paying attention. Every promise you keep sends one message. Every promise you break sends another. And over time those messages turn into beliefs. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, trust grows. It doesn't grow loudly. It doesn't announce itself. It grows quietly like roots under the surface. You don't wake up one day feeling suddenly confident. You just notice that you hesitate less. You doubt yourself a little less. You start believing that when you say you'll do something, you actually will. That kind of confidence isn't loud. It doesn't need validation. It feels steady. And it comes from discipline. Every time you break a promise to yourself, confidence weakens. Not in a dramatic way. Not in a way others can see. But inside something shifts. You start questioning your own words. You stop taking your own plans seriously. You stop believing your own intentions. You still want better. You still dream. But deep down there's a quiet voice that says, "You won't follow through anyway." That voice didn't appear out of nowhere. It was trained. This is why discipline is self-respect. Because when you respect someone, you don't lie to them. And improvement begins the moment you stop lying to yourself. Not the big lies. The small ones. "I'll do it later." "I don't have time." "I work better under pressure." "I'll start when I feel motivated." Those lies protect your comfort today, but they steal from your future. And the more often you tell them, the easier they become to believe. Stopping the lies doesn't mean becoming harsh. It means becoming honest. Honest sounds like this. "I don't feel like doing this, but I said I would." "This is uncomfortable, but it matters." "I don't need motivation to keep my word." That honesty is where discipline starts. Not in perfection. Not in intensity. In truth. There's a moment many people experience but don't recognize. It's when you're alone, faced with a small choice. No one is watching. No one will know what you decide. There's no reward waiting on the other side. You can quit. Or you can follow through. That moment feels insignificant. But it's not. Because that moment is a conversation between you and yourself. And how you respond determines how much you trust yourself later. Discipline is not about doing everything right. It's about doing the small, agreed-upon things even when it would be easier not to. It's about showing yourself that your words matter. When you say, "I'll wake up at this time," and you do, you send a signal. When you say, "I'll work on this for 10 minutes," and you do, you send another. When you say, "I'll stop when I said I would," and you do, you send another. Those signals stack. They build identity. Over time you stop asking, "Do I feel like it?" and start saying, "I already decided." That shift is powerful. Because feelings change constantly. Decisions don't. Discipline frees you from negotiating with yourself every day. And that freedom feels like peace. A lot of people think discipline means being hard on yourself. But real discipline is gentle and firm at the same time. It doesn't yell. It doesn't insult. It doesn't shame. It reminds, "This matters. You said you would. Your future self is counting on this." That's not hate. That's care. Respecting yourself doesn't mean indulging every desire. It means choosing what serves you long-term, even when short-term comfort is tempting. If someone you cared about deeply had a goal, you wouldn't sabotage them. You wouldn't constantly let them down. You wouldn't tell them excuses were fine forever. You'd want better for them. Discipline is treating yourself with that same level of care. There will be days when discipline feels heavy. Days when it feels unfair. Days when you wonder why you're trying at all. That's normal. Discipline doesn't mean you enjoy every moment. It means you stay aligned even when it's uncomfortable. Those days matter more than the easy ones. Because anyone can show up when it's convenient. Respect is proven when it's not. And something interesting happens when you live this way. You stop needing external motivation. You stop relying on hype. You stop waiting for the perfect mood. You move because you trust yourself. And self-trust is one of the most powerful forces you can build. Improvement doesn't start with massive change. It starts with one honest decision. I'm done lying to myself. From that moment on, things shift. You don't promise what you can't keep. You don't overcommit. You don't pretend. You choose small, realistic promises. And then you keep them. That's discipline. At first, it feels quiet. Almost boring. But slowly you feel stronger inside. Not because life got easier, but because you became someone you could rely on. And that changes everything. Discipline is not hate. It's respect. It's saying every day in small ways, I care about my future enough to do what's hard today. Every promise kept builds trust. Every lie abandoned builds clarity. And improvement begins the moment you stop lying to yourself. Most people don't fail because they don't want change badly enough. They fail because they aim too high too fast. They wake up one morning full of emotion and decide that everything will be different starting today. New habits, new mindset, new discipline, new life. They make big promises to themselves while the feeling is strong. This time will be different. This time they won't quit. For a moment it feels powerful. Then reality shows up. The alarm rings early and the body feels heavy. The motivation that felt so strong yesterday is quieter now. The plan looks bigger than expected. The effort feels overwhelming. One misstep turns into guilt. Guilt turns into frustration. Frustration turns into quitting. And soon zero returns. That's how it usually happens. Not because people are weak. Not because they lack potential. But because they misunderstand how discipline actually works. Discipline is not built through dramatic change. It's built through small actions repeated daily, even when the feeling isn't there. Most people want a complete transformation overnight. They want visible results immediately. They want proof that the effort is worth it before the effort has even been done. So they go all in. And when they can't maintain that intensity, they stop completely. Zero takes over again. Zero workouts. Zero pages read. Zero progress. Zero momentum. Zero feels comfortable because it requires nothing. But zero is dangerous. Because zero teaches the brain that quitting is always an option. Discipline works differently. It doesn't care about motivation. It doesn't care about mood. It doesn't care about perfect conditions. It only responds to consistency. Small actions. Daily repetition. No excuses. That's not exciting. It doesn't sound impressive. It doesn't make good announcements. But it works. There's a quiet power in doing something small every day. Something almost boring. Something that doesn't look like progress yet. On good days it feels easy. On bad days it feels pointless. And that's exactly why it matters. Even on bad days, do something. Not everything. Not your best. Just something. 10 minutes when you don't feel like doing an hour. One page when you can't focus enough to read a chapter. One rep when the full workout feels impossible. It doesn't look like much. But it sends a message to your mind. I don't stop completely. That message is everything. Because the habit of doing something, even when it's small, keeps the identity alive. Keeps the rhythm intact. It keeps you connected to the person you're trying to become. Bad days happen. Low energy happens. Life interrupts. Motivation disappears. But when zero is not an option, progress never fully stops. Think about how many times you've quit something not because you hated it, but because you missed one day, then two, then felt like you'd already failed. That feeling of what's the point now creeps in, and starting again feels harder than continuing ever was. That's the trap of zero. Zero makes restarting feel heavy. Small actions make continuing feel natural. There's a huge difference between saying, I missed a day so I failed, and saying, today was hard so I did less, but I still showed up. One builds shame. The other builds trust. Trust in yourself grows when you keep promises on ordinary days. Especially on days when no one is watching. Especially on days when you don't feel proud. Discipline isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself. It grows quietly in the background while you keep doing the work without waiting for motivation. At first it feels slow. Almost invisible. You wonder if it's even working. You look for results and don't see much. The voice in your head starts questioning the process. This is too small. This isn't enough. I should be doing more. But that voice is impatient, not wise. Small actions compound. Not in days. Not in weeks. But over time. What matters is not the size of the action. It's the refusal to quit. 10 minutes today keeps the habit alive tomorrow. One page today makes the next page easier. One rep today reminds your body that movement is normal. Zero breaks the chain. And once the chain is broken, restarting feels like climbing a wall instead of stepping forward. you start to see discipline differently. It's not about pushing harder. It's about showing up more often. It's about removing excuses instead of adding pressure. You stop asking, "Did I do enough?" and start asking, "Did I do something?" That shift changes everything. Because doing something keeps momentum alive. And momentum is fragile. It doesn't survive extremes. It survives consistency. You learn to respect small effort. You stop dismissing it. You stop calling it useless. You understand that small effort on a bad day is more powerful than big effort on a good day. Anyone can work hard when they feel inspired. Discipline shows up when inspiration is gone. And discipline doesn't demand perfection. It demands presence. You begin building a new relationship with yourself. One based on honesty instead of pressure. You accept that some days will be heavy. Some days will be messy. Some days will be quiet and slow. But zero is no longer acceptable. Even on days when you feel disappointed in yourself, you still do one small thing. And that small thing keeps your identity intact. I am someone who doesn't stop completely. Over time, that identity becomes stronger than motivation ever was. You stop relying on feelings to decide your actions. You act first and feelings follow later. And slowly, without you even noticing at first, discipline becomes part of who you are, not something you force. The days connect. The habits stick. The effort compounds. And one day you look back and realize the change didn't come from a massive transformation. It came from hundreds of small decisions to not choose zero. That's the secret most people miss. Big goals are built on tiny actions repeated without excuse. Not every day will be strong. Not every effort will be impressive. But as long as zero stays out of your life, progress never truly stops. Start small. Stay consistent. And never choose zero. Because zero is the enemy. And doing something, even when it's imperfect, is how discipline is quietly built. Willpower feels powerful when you first discover it. That surge of energy where you tell yourself, "This time I'm serious." You clean your space, write plans, maybe even change your routine for a few days. In those moments, it feels like you've finally unlocked something inside you. Like discipline has arrived. But then a few days pass. Life interrupts. Sleep is shorter. Stress shows up. Emotions fluctuate. And suddenly, that same willpower you trusted so much feels weak, unreliable, almost non-existent. You start wondering what went wrong even though nothing is actually wrong with you. The truth is simpler than we like to admit. Willpower is limited. It's not designed to carry your whole life. It's not meant to be used for every small decision, every habit, every moment of resistance. Willpower is a short-term tool, not a long-term system. And when you build your life around it, you burn out. Not because you lack strength, but because you're asking one mental resource to do a job it was never meant to do. Think about how many decisions you make in a single day. What time to wake up. Whether to check your phone first. What to eat. When to start work. When to stop. Whether to exercise. Whether to push or rest. Whether to procrastinate or focus. Each decision feels small, almost harmless. But together they drain you. Decision by decision your mental energy leaks out. By the time the hard moment arrives, the moment that actually matters, you're already tired. And tired minds choose comfort. That's why relying on willpower feels like fighting yourself every day. You wake up and negotiate. You argue internally. You try to convince yourself to do things you already decided you wanted to do. And that constant negotiation is exhausting. It turns discipline into a daily battle instead of a quiet process. Over time, you start avoiding the fight altogether. Not because you don't care, but because you're tired of debating with yourself. This is where something important shifts. You realize that discipline doesn't come from making better decisions all day long. It comes from making fewer decisions. Strong discipline isn't loud. It's not dramatic. It's automatic. It's built by removing choice from the process. When you decide once and follow automatically, you free your mind. You stop asking yourself, "Should I?" and replace it with, "This is what I do." There's a huge difference between those two. "Should I?" invites excuses. "This is what I do," ends the conversation. Wake-up time is decided. Not based on how you feel. Not based on how tired you are. It's just decided. The alarm goes off and your body moves because there is no debate. You don't spend mental energy weighing comfort against discipline. You don't create stories about why today is different. You stand up because that decision was already made by a calmer, clearer version of you. Workout time is decided. You don't wait to see if you feel motivated. You don't scroll and hope energy appears. You don't overthink the perfect routine. The time arrives and you move. Some days the workout feels strong. Some days it feels slow and heavy. But that doesn't matter. The habit isn't built on quality. It's built on consistency. You show up because the system tells you to, not because your emotions approved it. Work time is decided. When it's time to focus, you focus. Not perfectly. Not without distraction. But intentionally. You sit down because it's what happens at that hour. You remove the question of, do I feel like it? From the equation. And when you remove that question, resistance loses its power. This is what most people misunderstand about discipline. They think disciplined people are constantly motivated, constantly pushing themselves, constantly forcing effort. But disciplined people actually feel less resistance. Not because the work is easier, but because the decision-making is gone. They're not battling themselves every morning. They're following a structure they've already agreed to. Routine removes resistance because it removes friction. Friction comes from uncertainty, from choice, from hesitation. When your day has a shape, your mind relaxes. It knows what's coming next. It doesn't have to scan for threats or opportunities to escape. It settles into the rhythm. And when the mind is settled, action becomes easier. At first, routine can feel restrictive. Like you're boxing yourself in. Like you're losing freedom. But over time you realize the opposite is true. Routine gives you freedom from constant self-control. Freedom from mental exhaustion. Freedom from that draining feeling of always needing to push yourself just to do basic things. You stop wasting energy on decisions that don't deserve it. And that saved energy shows up when you need it most. In moments of real stress. In moments of unexpected challenge. In moments where life doesn't follow the plan. Because now your mental strength isn't being spent on whether to wake up or whether to work. It's available for things that truly require thinking, creativity, and emotional control. There's also something deeply comforting about routine. It creates safety. When the world feels chaotic, your habits stay steady. When emotions run high, your structure holds you. You don't have to trust how you feel today because you've built something you can trust every day. That's not weakness. That's wisdom. The less you decide daily, the stronger discipline becomes. Because discipline isn't about force. It's about design. You design your environment. You design your schedule. You design your habits. And then you live inside that design instead of fighting yourself within it. This doesn't mean life becomes rigid or joyless. It means the essentials are handled automatically. It means your basics are protected. You still have flexibility. You still have rest. You still have spontaneity. But those things exist inside a stable foundation, not in place of it. Over time, something subtle but powerful happens. You stop seeing discipline as effort. It becomes identity. You're no longer someone who is trying to be consistent. You're someone who follows a routine. You're someone who shows up because that's what you do. And identity is much stronger than motivation. There will still be days you don't feel like it. That never disappears. But those days stop controlling you. They pass through you instead of stopping you. You move anyway, not angrily, not forcefully, just calmly. And every time you do, your confidence grows. Not loud confidence. Quiet confidence. The kind that comes from knowing you don't need to rely on emotions to move forward. Removing choice doesn't make you robotic. It makes you stable. It frees you from the exhausting cycle of hype and disappointment. It turns discipline from something you chase into something you live. And once discipline becomes automatic, progress becomes inevitable. You stop asking yourself to be strong every day. You stop depending on willpower that fades. You stop negotiating with comfort. You build a system that carries you when motivation disappears. And that's when discipline stops feeling like a struggle and starts feeling like support. Routine removes resistance because resistance feeds on uncertainty. When uncertainty is gone, resistance has nothing to grab onto. You wake up. You move. You work. You rest. You repeat. And in that repetition, your mind grows quieter, stronger, steadier. This is how lasting discipline is built. Not through constant effort, but through fewer decisions. Not through force, but through structure. Not through willpower, but through systems that work even when you don't feel like it. Real discipline is private. Most people never see it. They don't hear about it. They don't clap for it. In fact, most of the time, no one even knows it's happening. It lives in the quiet hours, behind closed doors, in moments that look ordinary from the outside but feel heavy on the inside. It's easy to show up when eyes are on you. When someone is counting. When praise is guaranteed. When effort is noticed. Almost anyone can push themselves for applause. Almost anyone can stay consistent when validation is instant. But real discipline begins where all of that ends. No applause. No likes. No validation. Just you, standing alone with a decision. It's the early morning when the alarm goes off and your body begs for more sleep. No one would know if you stayed in bed. No one would question you. The world would move on exactly the same. That's when discipline speaks, not loudly, not aggressively, but quietly. It asks a simple question. Are you going to show up anyway? It's the late evening when your energy is gone and distractions feel comforting. The work could wait. The habit could be skipped. The promise you made to yourself feels negotiable. No one is watching. No one is reminding you. That's when discipline becomes real. Because discipline isn't about being seen. It's about being honest. Most people think discipline is built on big days, on dramatic breakthroughs, on moments of intense effort. But those moments are rare. They come and go. They look impressive, but they don't last long enough to shape a life. The days that matter most are the boring ones, the quiet ones, the repetitive ones, the days where nothing exciting happens, days where progress feels invisible, days where motivation is absent, days where you wonder if any of it is even working. Those are the days that decide everything. On those days there is no emotional reward, no sense of accomplishment, no surge of excitement, just routine, just effort, just showing up again. And that's exactly where discipline is built. Boring days teach you something important. They teach you how to keep going without emotional fuel. They teach you how to act without needing inspiration. They teach you how to rely on commitment instead of feelings. Because feelings change. Discipline doesn't. There are moments when you'll question yourself. When you'll feel behind. When you'll look around and see others moving faster, being praised more, receiving attention you aren't getting. And in those moments, a quiet doubt appears. What's the point of trying so hard when no one notices? That question is dangerous. Because discipline isn't meant to impress others. It's meant to build you. The work you do in silence shapes your identity. It teaches you who you are when no one is watching. It builds self-trust in a way nothing else can. Every time you show up privately, you send yourself a message. I can rely on me. That message matters more than any compliment. Most people never experience this kind of discipline because they confuse motivation with commitment. Motivation feels good. It's exciting. It gives energy. But it fades quickly. And when it fades, people stop. Discipline continues even when motivation disappears. It continues when the routine feels dull. When progress feels slow. When results aren't obvious. It continues when the only reward is knowing you didn't quit. That's not glamorous. That's not exciting. But it's powerful. Private discipline is lonely sometimes. There's no one to cheer you on. No one to remind you why you started. You have to remember on your own. You have to decide again and again that what you're building matters, even if no one else sees it yet. That's not easy. Some days you'll want proof. Proof that the effort is worth it. Proof that you're not wasting your time. Proof that something is changing. And when that proof doesn't come, discipline asks you to keep going anyway. Not because it feels good, but because it's right. The strongest habits are built quietly. The strongest people are shaped in silence. Not in moments of attention, but in moments of choice. Choice after choice. Day after day. Without drama. And one day something shifts. Not suddenly. Not loudly. But subtly. You notice that what once felt hard now feels normal. That what once required effort now feels automatic. That you no longer argue with yourself as much. You just do what needs to be done. That's when you realize discipline has taken root. You didn't become disciplined by forcing yourself. You became disciplined by showing up so many times that quitting stopped feeling like an option. The boring days did that. The unnoticed days. The quiet days. Those days trained your mind. They strengthened your patience. They built resilience without you even realizing it. They taught you how to move forward without needing constant reassurance. And that's a rare skill. Because life doesn't always celebrate effort. Most of the work that matters goes unseen. Most growth happens quietly. Most progress is invisible until it isn't. People will eventually notice the results. They'll see the strength, the confidence, the consistency. They'll ask how you stayed so disciplined. How you kept going. How you didn't give up. They won't see the boring days. They won't see the quiet decisions. They won't see the moments where you almost stopped but didn't. But you will. And that's enough. Real discipline doesn't need an audience. It doesn't need approval. It doesn't need recognition. It exists in private, shaping your character one small decision at a time. Just you showing up again. And again. And again. That's where discipline is built. Pain is part of improvement even though no one really wants to admit it. We live in a world that sells comfort as the goal. Easier routines. Faster results. Shortcuts that promise growth without struggle. But deep down, everyone who has truly changed knows the truth. Improvement feels uncomfortable by design. If it didn't, everyone would be improving all the time. Growth stretches you in ways that don't feel gentle. Discipline tests parts of you that would rather stay asleep. I didn't understand this at first. For a long time, I thought something was wrong with me because progress felt so hard. Every time I tried to improve myself, my habits, my mindset, my consistency, it came with discomfort. Waking up earlier felt painful. Saying no to distractions felt painful. Staying focused when motivation faded felt painful. I kept asking myself, why does improvement have to hurt this much? I thought maybe I was doing it wrong. But I wasn't doing it wrong. I was doing it honestly. The truth is, improvement exposes you. It puts you face to face with your limits. It shows you how undisciplined you've been, how inconsistent, how easily you choose comfort. And that confrontation doesn't feel good. It stings. It bruises the ego. It creates resistance inside you that says, go back to what's familiar. This is too much. That resistance is not a sign to stop. It's a sign that growth has begun. Growth stretches you. And stretching, by nature, feels uncomfortable. Muscles don't grow by staying relaxed. They grow by being challenged, torn slightly, then rebuilt stronger. The same thing happens mentally and emotionally. When you try to become better, your old self resists. Your old habits fight back. Your comfort zone tightens its grip. I remember mornings when the alarm went off and my body felt heavy, like it was begging me to stay in bed. Not because I needed rest, but because I needed comfort. The pain of getting up felt unnecessary in that moment. My mind offered excuses so smoothly it almost felt reasonable. Just today. You can start tomorrow. Missing one day won't matter. That was pain speaking. But not the pain of effort. The pain of resistance. Discipline tests you in quieter ways than people expect. It's not always loud or dramatic. Most of the time it's subtle. It's the test of doing what you said you would do when no one is watching. It's the test of staying consistent when results are invisible. It's the test of choosing long-term improvement over short-term relief. And every one of those tests comes with discomfort. There was a phase where I tried to avoid that discomfort. I told myself I was being balanced. I'd work a little, rest a lot, and convince myself I was still moving forward. But deep down, I knew I was negotiating with my potential. I was trying to improve without feeling the pain that improvement requires. It never worked. The progress was slow. The results were fragile. And worst of all, I started feeling a different kind of pain creeping in. The pain of knowing I could do more but wasn't. The pain of watching time pass while staying the same. The pain of quiet regret. That's when I realized something important. The goal is not to avoid pain, but to choose the right pain. Pain is unavoidable. One way or another, you will feel it. The question is not whether you'll suffer, but how. There is the pain of effort. It's sharp at first. It shows up when you push yourself, when you say no to comfort, when you stay disciplined despite resistance. This pain feels heavy in the moment, but it carries a strange sense of pride with it. Even when it's uncomfortable, there's a quiet voice inside you that says, this matters. And then there is the pain of regret. This pain is quieter, but it lasts longer. It shows up when you don't try. When you avoid discomfort. When you choose ease over growth again and again. At first, it feels harmless, comfortable even. But over time, it becomes heavier than effort ever was. It settles in your chest as dissatisfaction. It whispers at night. It asks questions you don't want to answer. What if you had tried? Why didn't you start earlier? Why did you stop? I felt both pains. And I can say this with honesty, the pain of effort hurts less in the long run. The pain of effort builds strength. Not just physical or external strength, but internal strength. The kind that makes you trust yourself. Every time you choose effort, you send yourself a message. You say, I can rely on me. That trust compounds. It changes how you see challenges. It changes how you carry yourself through difficulty. The pain of regret does the opposite. It builds excuses. It trains you to justify inaction. It makes you skilled at explaining why you didn't do something instead of proud of what you did. Over time, those excuses become part of your identity. And breaking out of that identity is far more painful than effort ever was. I noticed this shift clearly during a period when I was trying to build better habits. At first, staying consistent felt exhausting. Some days I didn't feel motivated at all. Some days the effort felt pointless. But I kept showing up. Not perfectly but honestly. And slowly something changed. The discomfort didn't disappear, but it became familiar. Manageable. What surprised me most was how the regret faded. I stopped lying to myself. I stopped feeling that quiet shame that comes from knowing you're avoiding your own potential. Even on hard days I could look back and say, at least I tried. That feeling is powerful. Improvement doesn't reward you immediately. It tests whether you're willing to suffer now to avoid suffering later. It asks whether you're brave enough to choose temporary discomfort over permanent dissatisfaction. There were moments when discipline felt lonely, when it felt like I was swimming against the current while everyone else seemed relaxed and carefree. Social media made it worse. It showed highlight reels of success without showing the pain behind it. It made effort look optional, like some people were just born ahead. But that's an illusion. Everyone who grows pays a price. They just don't always talk about it. The pain of improvement isn't glamorous. It doesn't come with applause. Most of the time, it happens in silence. Early mornings, late nights, repeated attempts, boring routines, internal battles that no one sees. That's why so few people choose it consistently. There was a moment when I fully accepted this. I stopped asking improvement to feel good all the time. I stopped expecting motivation to carry me. I accepted that discomfort was part of the deal. That mindset shift alone changed everything. Instead of asking, "Why is this so hard?" I started asking, "Which pain am I choosing today?" That question grounded me. On days when effort felt heavy, I reminded myself of the alternative. The pain of staying the same. The pain of looking back months later and realizing nothing changed because I avoided discomfort. Suddenly, effort didn't feel like punishment. It felt like investment. Growth still stretched me. Discipline still tested me. Some days were still frustrating. But the resistance lost its power. Because I stopped fighting the discomfort and started respecting it. Pain became a signal, not a warning. It signaled that I was pushing beyond my old limits. It signaled that I was doing something that required change. It signaled that improvement was happening, even if results weren't visible yet. That's something most people misunderstand. They think pain means they're failing. In reality, pain often means you're training. The absence of discomfort doesn't mean you're doing well. Sometimes it means you're avoiding growth entirely. I've learned to be cautious of comfort now. Not to hate it, but to question it. If everything feels too easy all the time, it usually means I'm not challenging myself enough. Growth asks something from you. It demands energy, focus, and sacrifice. And yes, it hurts sometimes. But the pain of effort leaves you stronger, wiser, more confident in your ability to handle difficulty. The pain of regret leaves you stuck, replaying the same what if over and over again. One builds strength. The other builds excuses. Every day in small ways you choose which one you're building. You don't have to be extreme. You don't have to suffer endlessly. But you do have to accept that improvement will never feel completely comfortable. And that's not a flaw. That's the design. Once you accept that, pain stops feeling like an enemy. It becomes a guide. A reminder that you're moving forward instead of standing still. And one day you'll look back and realize something quietly powerful. The discomfort you once feared was shaping you all along. The pain you chose didn't break you. It prepared you. That's when improvement stops feeling like a struggle and starts feeling like progress. Earned, honest, and real. You don't improve by doing something once. That's one of the hardest truths to accept, because the mind loves quick wins. It loves the idea that one good day, one strong decision, one burst of motivation can change everything. And for a moment it feels true. You feel proud. You feel different. You tell yourself, this is it. I've changed. But then the next day comes. And the day after that. And improvement quietly asks a deeper question. Who are you becoming? Because real change doesn't come from a single action. It comes from identity. From the person you slowly, repeatedly prove yourself to be. At first, this feels frustrating. You want results. You want visible progress. You want proof that your effort matters. But improvement isn't loud in the beginning. It doesn't announce itself. It whispers. It shows up in the small moments when quitting would be easier. You don't become better because you did something once. You become better when you become someone who doesn't quit. That shift doesn't happen overnight. It happens quietly, often without you realizing it. There's a moment early on where discipline feels forced. You're doing the work, but it feels heavy. You have to convince yourself every time. Your mind looks for excuses. Your body looks for comfort. Everything in you wants to return to what's familiar. This is where most people stop. Not because they're incapable. Not because they're weak. But because their identity hasn't caught up yet. Inside, they still see themselves as someone who tries, not someone who shows up. Someone who starts, not someone who finishes. Someone who hopes to improve, not someone who does. So every action feels like a fight. But something changes when you keep going anyway. The first few times you show up, it feels unnatural. Like you're pretending to be someone you're not. You wake up early even though every part of you wants to sleep. You do the work even though motivation is missing. You keep the promise even though no one is watching. And afterward, there's a quiet thought that lingers. I showed up today. It doesn't feel life-changing. It doesn't feel dramatic. But it stays with you. The next time is slightly different. Still hard but familiar. You remember that you did it before. You remember that you survived the discomfort. You remember that quitting didn't feel as good as you expected. Another action. Another small win. And without realizing it, you start collecting evidence. Evidence that you're capable. Evidence that you can follow through. Evidence that you don't always quit when things get uncomfortable. That's how identity forms. Not through affirmations. Not through motivation videos. But through repeated proof. Every disciplined action reinforces something new inside you. I'm someone who shows up. At first, it feels like a question. Then it feels like a possibility. Eventually, it feels like a fact. You notice it in how you speak to yourself. You stop saying I'll try. You start saying I'll do it. Not confidently at first, but honestly. I'm someone who finishes. This one takes time. Finishing is harder than starting. Starting feels exciting. Finishing feels lonely. Finishing means facing doubt, boredom, resistance, and fatigue. There are days when you want to stop halfway. When the progress feels slow. When the reward feels far away. When no one seems to notice your effort. Those days shape you more than the easy ones. Every time you finish something you wanted to quit, something solid forms inside you. A quiet confidence. Not the loud kind that needs validation, but the steady kind that knows what it's capable of. You don't celebrate it much. You just move forward. I'm someone who improves. This identity grows slowly. Improvement is subtle. It's not always visible from the outside. Sometimes it's just reacting a little less emotionally, thinking a little clearer, showing a little more patience, choosing effort when comfort is available. You might still fail. You might still have off days. But your relationship with failure changes. Failure no longer defines you. It informs you. Because someone who improves doesn't quit at the first mistake. They adjust. They learn. They continue. This is where identity starts driving behavior instead of the other way around. At the beginning, you rely on discipline to act like the person you want to become. Later you act naturally because that's who you are. Showing up stops feeling heroic. Feels normal. Not showing up feels strange. That's when you know the shift has happened. Your identity changes first, even if you don't notice it in real time. You might look back one day and realize that the things that once felt impossible now feel automatic. The habits that once required effort now feel like part of your routine. The discipline that once felt heavy now feels like self-respect. You didn't force yourself into this version of you. You became them. This process isn't fast and it's not glamorous. There are long stretches where it feels like nothing is happening. Where you wonder if the effort is worth it. Where you question if you're making any real progress. But beneath the surface, something is changing. Every time you choose to show up when you don't feel like it, you're voting for a new identity. Every time you finish what you started, you're reinforcing it. Every time you improve instead of quitting, you're strengthening it. An identity is powerful because once it's formed, it works for you. You don't need constant motivation to act in alignment with who you believe you are. You don't need pressure. You don't need reminders. You act because it feels right. A person who sees themselves as disciplined doesn't debate whether to show up. They just do. A person who sees themselves as consistent doesn't rely on mood. They rely on commitment. A person who sees themselves as someone who improves doesn't fear mistakes. They expect them. This is why doing something once doesn't change you. Anyone can do something once. But becoming someone who doesn't quit changes everything. It changes how you see challenges. They're no longer threats. They're tests of identity. It changes how you handle setbacks. They're no longer reasons to stop. They're part of the process. It changes how you talk to yourself. With more trust, more patience, more respect. You stop chasing motivation and start building character. And character is what carries you on the days motivation disappears. Identity drives behavior. Always has. If you believe you're someone who gives up, you'll find reasons to stop. If you believe you're someone who shows up, you'll find a way to continue. The most important work you're doing isn't visible to anyone else. It's the quiet work of becoming. Becoming someone who keeps promises to themselves. Becoming someone who finishes what they start. Becoming someone who improves even when progress is slow. That's where real change begins. Not with a single action, but with a new identity that you reinforce every day you choose not to quit. Talent fades without discipline. That sentence sounds simple, almost obvious, but it takes most people years of frustration to truly understand it. Discipline grows without talent, slowly, quietly, almost invisibly. And most people aren't failing because they lack ability. They fail because they stop. They stop when things get boring. They stop when progress feels slow. They stop when effort isn't rewarded fast enough. Consistency compounds quietly. And one day, it shows. At the beginning, talent feels like everything. Feels like the golden ticket. You see it in school, in sports, in creative work, in business. There's always someone who seems naturally gifted. Someone who learns faster, performs better, gets noticed sooner. When you're young, you assume that's the deciding factor. You think success belongs to the people who start strong. And for a while it looks like you're right. Talented people shine early. They get praise. They get encouragement. They get told, "You're really good at this." That kind of feedback feels powerful. It creates momentum. It builds confidence. It makes effort feel optional because things come easily. But ease has a hidden cost. When something comes easily, you're rarely forced to build discipline. You don't learn how to sit with discomfort. You don't learn how to push through boredom. You don't learn how to keep going when the excitement fades, because for a long time, the excitement never fades. Until one day it does. Every path reaches a point where talent alone isn't enough. The learning curve steepens. The competition increases. Progress slows down. That's the moment discipline is required. And that's where many talented people quietly disappear. They don't fail loudly. They don't crash dramatically. They just stop. They lose interest. They move on. They tell themselves it wasn't meant to be, or that they got busy, or that something else matters more now. From the outside it looks like a choice. From the inside it often feels like confusion. They've never had to rely on consistency before. So when consistency becomes the requirement, they don't know how to access it. On the other side there's a different kind of person. Not the most gifted. Not the fastest learner. Not the one who stands out immediately. Just someone who shows up. Someone who keeps going even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's boring, even when no one is watching. This person doesn't feel special. They often doubt themselves. They often wonder if they're good enough. They see others ahead of them and assume they're behind because they lack something important. But they keep going anyway. They practice when it's not fun. They work when the results aren't visible. They repeat the basics long after others have moved on to something new. Not because they love the grind, but because they made a quiet decision not to quit. At first, nothing seems to change. Days pass. Weeks pass. Months pass. Progress is slow, sometimes so slow it feels imaginary. There are moments where they question everything. Moments where stopping feels tempting. Moments where they think maybe talent really is the deciding factor after all. But they show up again the next day. This is where consistency starts doing its work. Consistency doesn't announce itself. It doesn't feel dramatic. It doesn't feel powerful in the moment. In fact, most of the time it feels dull, repetitive, ordinary, like nothing special is happening. But under the surface something is building. Skills sharpen. Muscles strengthen. Understanding deepens. Confidence grows quietly, not from praise but from proof. Proof that you can rely on yourself. Proof that you don't disappear when things get hard. That kind of confidence is different. It's not loud. It doesn't need validation. It's steady. Most people never see this phase. They quit before consistency has time to compound. They expect visible results too early. They want reassurance before the process is finished. When reassurance doesn't come, they assume something is wrong. Nothing is wrong. They just didn't stay long enough. Consistency works the same way interest works. One small effort doesn't look impressive. Neither do 10. But repeated daily, those small efforts stack. They build on each other. What once felt difficult becomes normal. What once felt impossible becomes manageable. And then, slowly, you notice something surprising. The people who started ahead are no longer ahead. Some are stuck. Some have stopped. Some are starting over in something else, chasing that early feeling again. Meanwhile, the consistent person has moved forward quietly, steadily, without making noise about it. There's no sudden leap. No cinematic moment. Just gradual progress that becomes undeniable over time. This is why most people misunderstand success. They think the difference is talent. They think it's intelligence, creativity, luck, or confidence. Those things matter, but not as much as people think. The real difference is who stays when it stops being exciting. Because success is not built in moments of inspiration. It's built in moments of resistance. The mornings you don't feel like starting. The evenings you want to skip. The days where nothing seems to be working. Those moments are not obstacles. They are the training ground. Discipline grows without talent. That doesn't mean talent is useless. It means talent is fragile without structure. Talent gives you a head start. Discipline gives you distance. Without discipline, talent gets distracted. It chases novelty. It avoids discomfort. It leaves when things feel heavy. With discipline, even average ability becomes dangerous. Because it doesn't stop. This is why most people aren't failing because they lack ability. They fail because they stop. They stop when effort becomes inconvenient. They stop when progress is slow. They stop when no one is watching. Stopping feels harmless in the moment. Just one missed day. One skipped session. One delayed task. But stopping has momentum too. Once you break the chain, it's easier to stay broken. Consistency, on the other hand, creates its own momentum. Showing up today makes it easier to show up tomorrow. Keeping one promise builds trust with yourself. That trust becomes identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who follows through. That identity shift is powerful. Because once you believe you're consistent, you protect that belief. You don't need motivation as much. You don't negotiate with your feelings as often. You don't wait for the perfect moment. You act because that's who you are now. The world doesn't notice this right away. There's no applause for showing up daily. There's no spotlight for doing the basics over and over again. In fact, consistency often looks invisible from the outside. And that's why so many people quit. They want evidence before the process is finished. But consistency compounds quietly. It's happening even when it doesn't feel like it. It's happening in the background, in the small improvements, in the reduced friction, in the growing ease with things that used to feel hard. Then one day something shifts. People start noticing. Results become visible. Progress accelerates. From the outside it looks sudden. They say things like, "You're doing so well lately. You really improved fast. You're lucky." That came out of nowhere. They didn't see the months of repetition. They didn't see the boredom. They didn't see the doubt. They didn't see the days you wanted to stop but didn't. They only see the outcome. That's why they call it luck, or talent, or timing. But you know better. You know it was consistency. It was choosing to continue when stopping would have been easier. It was trusting a process that didn't give immediate feedback. It was staying committed even when confidence was low. And the most powerful part? Once consistency has done its work in one area, you realize it works everywhere. In health, in learning, in relationships, in mindset, in personal growth. The formula doesn't change. Show up. Repeat. Adjust. Don't stop. Talent may get attention early, but attention doesn't equal progress. Discipline builds something deeper. Something sustainable. That's why consistency beats talent. Not quickly. Not loudly. But inevitably. And one day, it shows. No one is coming to push you. That sentence lands quietly, but it carries weight. At first, it doesn't sound dramatic. It doesn't shout. It doesn't threaten. It just sits there, simple and honest. And the longer you sit with it, the more you realize how true it is. There is no hidden hand that will suddenly appear and lift you up when things get hard. No voice that will knock on your door every morning and demand that you become better. No one is coming to drag you toward the life you say you want. For a long time, you may have believed otherwise. You may have waited for motivation to arrive like a spark. You may have hoped that circumstances would improve first, that pressure would ease, that life would give you a sign. Maybe you told yourself that once things calm down, you'll focus. Once people support you, you'll try harder. Once the timing feels right, you'll finally commit. But life doesn't work that way. Days pass whether you act or not. Weeks turn into months. Months quietly become years. And slowly, without realizing it, waiting becomes a habit. Comfort becomes familiar. And potential stays locked behind excuses that once sounded reasonable. No one will force improvement for you. That truth is uncomfortable because it removes all the hiding places. You can't blame people forever. You can't blame circumstances forever. You can't keep pointing at the past and saying that's why you're stuck. At some point, responsibility finds you. And when it does, it doesn't ask gently. It just stands there waiting for you to acknowledge it. Improvement is lonely in the beginning. There's no applause when you decide to wake up earlier. No celebration when you choose discipline over comfort. No audience when you say no to distractions and yes to effort. Most of the time, no one even notices. And that's where many people stop. Not because they can't improve, but because no one is watching. But improvement was never meant to be a performance. It's meant to be a decision you make when no one is looking. You either discipline yourself, or life disciplines you later. Life's discipline is harsh. It comes without warning and without mercy. It shows up as regret, as missed chances, as the quiet pain of knowing you could have done more but didn't. Life disciplines you through stress you weren't prepared for, through responsibilities that feel overwhelming, through problems that arrive when you don't have the strength to handle them. Self-discipline, on the other hand, feels hard now but gentle later. It asks for effort up front. It asks you to do things when you don't feel like it, to show up tired, to keep going when progress is slow, to say no to what feels good in the moment for what will matter in the long run. The pain of discipline is temporary. The pain of regret lasts much longer. This is the moment you choose. Not in some dramatic scene. Not with loud music or perfect clarity. This moment usually looks ordinary. You're alone with your thoughts. Maybe sitting quietly. Maybe scrolling on your phone. Maybe lying awake at night, staring into the dark. And suddenly, something shifts inside you. You feel the weight of time. You feel the gap between where you are and where you want to be. That gap doesn't close itself. Choice is what closes it. Not tomorrow. Not next week. No. Now is uncomfortable. Now is inconvenient. Now asks you to act without guarantees. Now doesn't wait for confidence. It doesn't wait for motivation. It only asks for commitment. Choosing now means accepting that you won't feel ready, that you'll doubt yourself, that you'll stumble, that some days you'll feel strong and other days you'll feel like quitting. But you move anyway. You do the work anyway. You keep promises to yourself anyway. Because the strongest people aren't the ones with perfect discipline. They're the ones who decide again and again even after they fail. There will be days you break your routine. Days you fall back into old habits. Days when discipline feels heavy and progress feels invisible. In those moments, the old voice will return. The one that says, you can start later. The one that says, one more day won't matter. The one that says, this is too hard. That voice never disappears completely. What changes is whether you listen to it. Every time you choose discipline, even in a small way, you strengthen something inside you. You build trust with yourself. You prove that your word matters. That you can rely on yourself when things get uncomfortable. That trust becomes confidence. Not the loud kind. Not the kind that needs validation. The quiet kind. The kind that says, I'll handle this, even when no one else believes you. No one is coming to push you. And once you accept that, something strange happens. You stop feeling abandoned by life and start feeling in control of it. You realize that waiting was never protection. It was postponement. And postponement has a cost. This is the final decision, not because it ends the struggle, but because it begins something real. A life where you don't rely on external pressure. A life where you don't need someone else to believe in you first. A life where progress is built quietly, consistently, intentionally. You choose now and tomorrow becomes easier. You choose now and next week looks different. You choose now and the future starts responding to your effort. Not because life suddenly becomes fair, but because you finally showed up. No, you don't need to feel ready. You don't need motivation. You need discipline. Force yourself to improve. Not because it's easy, but because your future depends on it.